You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks, it's Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. For 16 years and 24 episodes, we bring the Chris Voss Show, the CEOs, the billionaires, the White House presidential advisors, the Pulitzer Prize winners, all the smart journalists, and the authors that bring you their stories of life, their journeys, their lessons, and help you improve the quality of your life. And if your life isn't being improved, well, go listen to all the episodes again, man. What are you missing? Like, I learned from every guest we have on the show. New paradigms, new lessons of life, new stories. Just amazing. Because I'm sick of mine because, you know, I have to hear them all the time, my stories. So I like other people's stories. And that's what's just amazing because you can learn from them. I learned nothing from my stories because, well, I made so many mistakes. I learned a lot. Anyway, whatever that means. Anyway, guys, go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1, the TikTok, Facebook.com/Chris Voss. Today, we have an amazing young man on the show, and we're going to be talking about his journey in his books and all that good stuff. His third book, I believe it is. He was a multi-book author. We love those. Was out July 16th, 2024. It is called God's Existence: Deeper Thoughts for Greater Insights. It seems like we should have a soundbite for that, like deeper thoughts. Anyway, I don't know. It just sounded funny in my head. But it wasn't funny out loud, so there you go. I got Gary to laugh. Gary R. Lindberg joins us on the show. We're going to talk to him about his books, his insights, some of his experience in life and stories, and what makes him great. He was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The author's parents had just moved there before his 7th birthday to Santa Maria, California. He went from the cold to the warmth. There he grew up and attended grade school through high school. He's a graduate of University of California, Berkeley, with a degree in U.S. history. He volunteered to join the Peace Corps for 2.5 years, during which he taught primary school students and teachers various techniques in trial school gardens program in the Ivory Coast, which is located in West Africa between Liberia and Ghana. He became fluent in French during that time, and after his Peace Corps service, he toured Europe, primarily visiting Italy, Germany, including East Berlin under communist control, France, England, and the Netherlands. And since he was drafted, he volunteered for the Navy, which he served 4 years. He went on to San Francisco State University, got an MBA, and with a concentration on management personnel. He began his 43 career as a human resources professional for a number of major companies, and then he retired in 2019 to pursue his personal endeavors, and he's been writing books, I think, ever since. Welcome to the show, Gary. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for taking time to talk with me today. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for coming, too. What an honorable career you've had. A lot of people used to join Peace Corps back in the day. That used to be a thing.
Well, I think it's still a thing. It still exists, and it's still helping other countries. And so I was very proud to be part of that, and it's one of the greatest highlights of my life.
Yeah, and you got some great pictures on your website of your experience there, too, as well. So give us .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
Well, on the internet, they can find me on my website at GaryRLindberg.com. That's GaryRLindberg.com.
There you go. So give us a 30,000 overview. What's in this new book?
Well, my book, God's Existence: Deeper Thoughts for Greater Insights, is a book that explores the various controversies in the books of Genesis and Exodus in the Old Testament. I ask questions like, did evolution contradict the Bible? Or was evolution a tool that God used in his creation? Who wrote the Old Testament? Why did they write the Old Testament? What should be our thinking about different ideas or controversies like Adam and Eve, the missing people in the Bible, the long lifespans of Adam's descendants from Adam on to Noah, and even the Great Flood. And in the book of Exodus, was Moses a real person? Did he really exist?
He did, because I saw him in the movie. He was in that. He was in that movie, right? They had
He was
a documentary.
Very live and well there, right?
1968 movie. I think he looked like Charleston Heston. It was kind of weird, but
yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah,
I noticed that too. It was he did all right.
Yeah.
Well, also, another thing is, did the Exodus itself actually happen? And if so, when? So these are the ideas that I cover in my book.
Nice. So do you break them down? Do you you flesh them out on you challenging those ideas?
Yes, I do. And I talk about what inspired me to write the book was in my first book, God's Existence, Truth or Fiction, The Answer Revealed. I did talk a little bit about evolution. And in my second book, which is actually the third book I wrote, I wanted to explore the concept of evolution more deeply and more thoroughly. And also, I wanted to discuss some of the controversies that I just talked about. And that's what inspired me to write the book.
And so you were inspired by what was kind of the proponent to that? Was there like questions in your mind, or did you find that other people had questions that needed answers, and you're like, I'm going to break this down?
Well, I thought there were questions not only in my mind, but in other people's minds. And that's why I wanted to freely think about these issues, these controversies, and not just follow what church teaching might be or what Christian doctrine might be. I wanted to just let myself loose and think about what it really meant and how it really should be defined.
Yeah. So let's tease out a little bit here, because we want people to pick up the book. Why was the Old Testament written? What did you discover?
Well, I discovered that the Old Testament had a lot of different groups or Israelite, sects that had different ideas. And I read the book, the Bible on Earth by Israel Finkelstein and Neil Asher Silberman, and they examined all these different groups and their ideas, and they wrote that the main purpose of the Old Testament was to unite all the various diverse Israelite groups into one unified people. And they concluded that that is exactly what happened. And I saw no evidence to contradict that. So that's what I think also.
There you go. So just in, the Old Testament's good with you, right? What did you discover about the story of the creation in Genesis?
Well, the story of creation is rather an interesting conundrum, if you will. The book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 1, describes the outline that God followed in the various steps he took in his creation. But I found that there were some mistakes. And for example, the book of Genesis says on day 4, God created the sun and the stars. Well, how did that happen? When you look at Genesis itself and chapter 1, verse 1, Genesis says that God created the heavens and earth. And he said, let there be light. And there was light, and it was good. So if there was light to start with, how could they wait till the 4th day for God to create the light? He already created it. When he created the universe, that happens, according to scientists, 13.7 billion years ago.
Wow.
Well, then he created the solar systems, and our Milky Way solar system was created 4.67 billion years ago, and the earth was created 4.54 billion years ago. So what did God do between 13.7 billion years and 4.67 billion years? He created the other solar systems, and along with them, their suns. So that's part of the process. So when the fourth day was not a day when he created the sun, he had already done that. So that's one thing I found. I also found that there are actually two stories of creation in the book of Genesis. Chapter 1, verse 1 is one version. It's the outline, as I mentioned. And the second version is chapter 2, verse 4. And that version, it was not a full, complete description of the creation. They had some points that they made in their writing. This happened, and then that happened, and so forth. But it's fundamentally, if you read chapter 2, it's a description of Adam and Eve and their descendants. And chapter 5 actually lists all the descendants from Adam to Noah, and then carries on about Noah's descendants. So I found that probably the chapter 2 verse 4 was the first version in the Old Testament that was written. And then the writers realized that that was an incomplete description of creation, because it didn't say anything about creation, basically, a few points here or there. And so they wrote the chapter 1 verse 1 version. And so but they didn't want to get rid of the chapter 2 verse 4 because it added to the outline that was already presented in chapter 1 verse 1. And so it was an expansion of the idea. It's just like if you write some kind of paper or thesis or something, you write about you make a general point, and then you add a more specific point under that general category. And that's kind of what they did with the book of Genesis. And so they realized that was a more complete version, but they didn't want to get rid of the chapter 2 verse 4 because it added to the original story.
There you go. What do you feel makes your book different from other books that have studied the Bible and tried to figure stuff out?
Well, I think there are several things. One, my book explores the different controversies, or some of the controversies in the books of Genesis and Exodus in unusual ways and in different ways than people usually expect. And secondly, my book defines basic terms in terms of the way people 6,000 years ago, like in Noah's time, defined the words, as opposed to how we interpret the words today. What is the word? What is the meaning of the word day? What's the meaning of the word year? What is the meaning of the word land? Or what's the meaning of the word earth? Those are words that have to be defined according to the way the writers 6,000 years ago wrote it and intended it to be. Not the way we defined earth. When you talk about God creating the universe in 6 days, he's not a magician. He didn't create everything and instantaneously like a magician does. He created it over billions of years. And so a day has to be interpreted in terms of a day from the perspective of the creator, not from the perspective of the created. And so the Bible has to be interpreted in the way God interprets time, not the way we interpret time. And so that another factor is that makes my book different is that I fit the pieces of the puzzle together in ways that are quite surprising and maybe even startling ways. And also, I want to add one more point, that when I discussed evolution, I wanted to examine how God created 13 different human species during the billions of years on the earth that he was creating. And you had your Cro-Magnon man, you had your Neanderthals, you had Homo erectus, and all these different 13 different people. And one by one, over time, they were eliminated. They became extinct. Until today, we only have one human species, even though we're influenced or contaminated or whatever mixed
I see some of the
Cro-Magnon and Neanderthals.
I see those on X right now, Twitter.
Yeah, there's only one species left, and that's us. And that's the official name of our species is Homo sapiens sapiens. So why do we have only one left? And so those are reasons why I think my book is different than others.
There you go. Well, it's an interesting book, and there's questions people have, so I think it's good to question things and educate and research and study. I mean, the Bible might be the most studied book ever in history, right? Pretty much, I think.
It's pretty well read, I guess.
Yeah, people have been trying to, a lot of these tomes that are around the world that help people understand things better. What lessons did you learn about the views of some Christians and science?
Well, when I wrote the books, I didn't fully understand why some Christians are so adamant in being against science. When I was going to school, I took a lot of science and mathematics, even up to calculus. And so I have a strong belief in science. So it didn't make any sense to me that they would be so much against science.
Yeah.
But I realized that the reason why they were so adamant against science is because they felt that science contradicted the Bible and the Bible contradicted science. So they felt that if they believed in both, they were believing in opposite points of view at the same time. And that made them what they characterize as double-minded. And that is something they could not tolerate. They couldn't tolerate being double-minded. Well, I have, when I was about 12 or 13, I asked myself a couple of very important questions. First, I asked myself, who created the Bible? Well, my answer to myself was that God created the Bible because he inspired a number of people to write it and to organize it. Well, then I asked myself a second question. Well, who created science? Well, the answer to that was pretty clear to me. God created science because he created the universe and all that's in it.
Yeah, he needs science to put everything together, maybe. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, that's right. And so there, I reached a sudden realization that if God created the Bible and God created science, they both must say the same thing. So that's why I say that some Christians need not fear science. They need to embrace it because it's the greatest support that they ever have.
Yeah.
And so they're misunderstanding God and his purpose.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. All right. Just logically, because, when you study science, you understand there's kind of a mathematics, physics, and clearly I'm not a scientist. But, there's like a pattern there that's pretty consistent. There's building blocks of the universe, dust and space dust and I don't know, some gold and, I clearly flunked science. So anyway, I'll just fake it right here. And so, he had to use science, probably not magic, probably use science to map all this stuff out and build it all, right? Like materials. It's kind of like when you play Minecraft, you use materials to make things. So maybe
like when you build a house.
Yeah, it was like a big Sims experiment, basically. So, so there you go. Yeah, I mean that makes sense. And then logically, you can finally square, science with a thing. One of the things you talk about in the book is, did the generations of Adam and Noah really live about 900 years? I often remember thinking about that when I was a kid, and I was like, really? And
that's
a lot of years. I'm
yeah,
57. I don't know that I want to live to 900.
900 years.
That's, my back hurts already, man. Just thinking.
Yeah, well, you and me both.
Yeah.
I think, no, they did not live 900 years. They lived a normal lifetime, just like we live, 75, 80, maybe a few got to 100. I think that's quite possible.
Maybe they were using a different calendar back then. I don't know.
Well, there you go. That's it. They didn't have a calendar.
See that?
So how did they define a year? That's why I said I have to define the words. A year. What is a year to Noah? Mm-hmm. If you or those people that lived at that time, I know that some people would harvest wheat several times a year. Does that mean that they counted every harvest as a new year? What about the fact that people would often say, well, this event occurred in the 5th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar or something like that, the king, the local king. Is that how they define a year? Did they define a year by every time there was a new month? How did they know what time they were counting? See, we first have to figure out what was their method of measurement. We don't even address that issue. Yeah. So how can we know what a year is? They lived 900 years. No, that's nonsense. And it reminds me of some of the writers did some embellishment when they wrote the Bible. And so you have this story about the harvest and the year. People, will say that a fisherman goes out and catches a fish. Well, every time he tells a story, the fish gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So then by the time he's finished telling the story, it's so big you can't handle it anymore.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's kind of, maybe, there was some of that went in the Bible. I know it went through some iterations of whatever. And all that stuff. So there you go. Let's see. The other question I had for you, what is your take on the Great Flood? I often wonder if that was just like a local thing. Maybe they,
exactly.
The world was like, the Bronx or something.
Exactly. That's what it was. Yeah. The Great Flood did occur. But it was a local flood, as you said. That's what it was.
Because flooding the whole earth is that takes a lot of work, man.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. They in the Bible it says they covered the whole earth. Well, they did not cover the pyramids of Egypt. We know that from science.
Yeah, wow,
and they did not cover North America or South America. They did not cover India or China or Australia or Russia. So it didn't cover the whole earth. Now, just imagine, Noah has got to add all the animals of the earth, right? So he travels to North America to get a buffalo. And then he goes to Australia to get a kangaroo. Did he do that? Of course he didn't do that. And so he by the time he got to North America, it would have been centuries before he got back. And how is he going to cross the ocean? Is he going to fly? Is he going to swim? I don't think so. Yeah. So no, the Great Flood happened, but what does the earth? What was the word? How do you define the word earth in the whole earth in the time of Noah? Well, I submit that it is defined by the amount of land that they were familiar with. They were familiar with the land in the Mesopotamia Valley. That's what the whole earth was to them. Yeah. Nothing more, nothing less. And science has already proven that there were local floods at the time of Noah. So that's not even an issue anymore. So some of these people that want to criticize the Bible, they'll say, well, it didn't cover the whole earth, so therefore the whole story is false. Therefore, he didn't even exist, and all this kind of stuff. And all that is nonsense.
Mm. So, and did he really get like 2 of every animal? Because that's one of the other things that they throw at.
Yeah.
I mean, did he get all the microbes and the mosquitoes and
Yeah, that's right. No, he didn't do all
bugs,
that.
and so
No, he didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, he would have included buffalo and kangaroos.
Mm.
So that he didn't get 2 of everything. He got 2 of everything in the local area, and he wasn't getting mosquitoes, and he wasn't getting even birds. He was getting animals basically, and that was all there was to it.
Yeah, because the people are like, I think there's a ark or something in Missouri or someplace, Kansas, where they have dinosaurs on the ark. And
is that right?
Yeah. And he's like, and people are like, yeah, he picked up Tyrannosaurus Rexes and put them on the boat.
He didn't do that.
Well, you get eaten, right?
Yeah, that was they disappeared before he came along.
That's what most people thought. Like, I remember Jurassic Park, it's a good way to get eaten by those velociraptors.
Exactly.
There you go. Let's see, what else do we have on deck for you? A couple more questions. Did Moses actually live? Was he a real person? I think we flesh that out earlier with Charlton Heston, the joke about
Yeah, we already settled that question. Charlton Heston proved it to us, didn't he?
Yeah, we got right into that. Let me skip to this one. The last question: did the Exodus actually happen? What was Exodus for those who need a foundation on that data?
Well, I don't know what kind of foundation I could present, but the Exodus was where Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt and to the quote promised land, which was and he led them through the Arabian Peninsula, and supposedly it took 40 years to get to the promised land, and he could have done it in about 3 days if he had walked straight to it. But the point is that the Exodus really did happen, but it wasn't quite the way some of the people want to interpret it to be. And the Pharaoh wasn't Ramses II; it was a different Pharaoh. And when they crossed apparently the Red Sea is very deep. And so it probably wasn't the Red Sea; it was probably the Reed Sea, and REED instead of that. And the whole concept of the Exodus was that, according to the Bible, there were 600,000 people who Moses led out of Egypt to the Promised Land. But that, to me, is another embellishment that the writers did. And we need to remember that the Old Testament was not written at the time that we think it was written. Let me put it this way: it was not written at the time that Noah actually did it. It was written much later. But the point I'm trying to get to is that the Exodus was the whole concept, or the whole history of it was communicated orally for not only a few years, but for centuries before they discovered the ability to write, and before they discovered the ability to print and publish the story. So the fact that when you have years and years of people telling other people, and then they tell other people, and they tell other people, and you go on and on and on for hundreds of years, you get some embellishments, and that's what happened. I've already mentioned a couple of embellishments. Well, not only the ark was an embellishment, supposedly, but the number of people was an embellishment, and just like the fish story. And you see that the people in that time, maybe it was much smaller than the 600,000 people, because the Bible says there were 600,000 men and an equal number of women and children. Well, there weren't 1.1 million people that Noah led out of Egypt. There were maybe 100,000 people total, men and women. And maybe that's wrong too. I don't know the precise figure, and I don't know that we'll ever know the precise figure. But the 600,000 is a false number, and it's just an embellishment that the writers wrote at the time.
Mm-hmm. There you go. So as final thoughts as we go out, tell people about your where people can find out more about you and everything else, and how it works, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, people can learn more about me at my website, GaryRLindberg.com. That's GaryRLindberg.com. And they can learn more about my Peace Corps experience, that where I was a Peace Corps volunteer in the mid-'60s. That's the early days of the Peace Corps, and my history there, and some of the events that occurred as I was trying to teach primary school children how to more effectively grow vegetables in a tropical climate. And there was obviously some cultural changes that I had to undergo. There were some events. I went to, did some traveling around West Africa, Timbuktu, in fact, the famous Timbuktu, and around Nigeria at the very beginning of their civil war. I went to East Africa on a chartered plane by Peace Corps volunteers, and traveled around the game reserves. Got my car stuck in the middle of nowhere with no water. There were 4 girls that asked me to be on with their group because they wanted a guy who knew about cars. Well, I told them I don't know anything about cars, so I wasn't the right person for them. And they said, "Well, you're a guy anyway, so we want you anyway." So I said, "Well, okay, as long as you understand." So then I go to Serengeti Park, and we have a nice visit there. And then as we leave, we one of the girls wanted to visit the Olduvai Gorge, where the Leakeys had, at that time, 55 years ago, discovered the oldest remains of man. And so we found this little road, and we drove off the main road and went up into the hills and followed this road that was supposedly leading us to Olduvai Gorge. And then the car overheated, and this smart ass Gary decided to open up the hood of the car and open up the radiator, when all the water splattered out.
Oh no.
And there we're stuck. If we weren't stuck before, we were stuck then. And so I recount the story of how we got out of that mess. And so that's kind of interesting. Then the first book was God's Existence, Truth or Fiction, The Answer Revealed, where I offer evidence that science proves the existence of God. I'm not proving that God exists. I'm saying how science proves the existence of God. For example, when I was in high school, when I was a sophomore, it was time for me to take biology, but I elected to take botany instead. And when I did, I learned a very important lesson. And that lesson was that all plant life is organized in 7 categories or levels of organization, starting with kingdom, phylum, down to the most specific level of species. Mm-hmm. Well, that was interesting enough. But then later in life, I learned that all animal life is also classified by the same 7 levels of categories. A little more complex of an organizational system than for plants, but nevertheless the same basic levels. And then it struck me that if all plant life is organized that highly, and all animal life is also organized that highly, they both cannot happen by accident. That cannot happen by random. It must happen by design. Therefore, it must happen by God.
Okay. There you go. So give us your .coms as we go out one last time.
GaryRLindberg.com. GaryRLindberg.com. And
There
thank
you
you
go.
so much for the time you've taken to talk to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And thanks for coming on. Thanks to my audience for tuning in. Order the book wherever fine books are sold. God's Existence, Deeper Thoughts for Greater Insights, out July 16th, 2024 by Gary R. Lindberg. Thanks for for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTok and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time.